Patricia Benavente. Can you talk about how, after being under such control in a totalitarian authoritarian group like Scientology, you've learned how to overcome self-doubt and second-guessing yourself, basically all the time, and the almost constant uncertainty of not being sure you're making the right decisions, even in simple things of life? Thanks, Patricia. First off, I'm going to say that I don't think I actually do so great at that. I second-guess myself all the time on almost everything. I only fairly recently, which is why I'm taking this question up, because I thought, oh yeah, I could talk about this in terms of some things that have happened recently. I started looking at the purposes of critical thinking and my position on certain things. You know, I talk politics all the time on Facebook and Twitter, and I throw it around here on the channel every now and again because it's of concern to me. And I think it's of concern to a lot of people, so I like to, you know, share my ideas about that. But my ideas have changed a lot, and it's really caused me to wonder, am I on the right side of this? Am I on the wrong side of this? What am I thinking? What am I doing? And I started thinking about critical thinking, and I realized that, you know, I get called out all the time for not being a very good critical thinker by people who disagree with me on something. And so, of course, if I disagree with them or I've come to some other conclusion than they have, then clearly I'm just not a good critical thinker like they are. I mean, you know, the arrogance of the statement is rather implicit. But people, you know, will do that, and they'll lob that at me as a kind of an insult. And I used to take it really personally. It used to really bother me because I want to be a good critical thinker. I've applied myself very hard to learn about the principles of good critical thinking, and I've shared a lot of those principles with you guys in the videos that I've made. But it's what it did was, because of the uncertainty of coming out of Scientology, you know, not that many years ago, and really being thrown for a loop. I mean, like, wow, my whole world was like way different. So learned about critical thinking, started applying that information, and being very uncertain about all kinds of things that I, you know, either used to be certain about or didn't ever know anything about. You know, I would take up a position on some issue, and then somebody would throw a good counter argument at me, and it would really get me thinking. And I'd be like, oh wow, that's really good. You know, that person pointed that out. I better think about that, figure out how to incorporate that into how I'm thinking about this position or issue or subject, and, you know, whatever it was. I mean, it could be anything. And then sort of resort, okay, well, does that change my position now? Does it not? What do I do with this? And I also was noticing that people like political pundits, commentators, long-term media pundits, were people who didn't particularly change their mind about things. I mean, Rush Limbaugh is talking about the same crap now that he was talking about in 1990 when I used to be a ditto head and followed him. I listen to him now, and I think the guy, you know, I don't think he has two gray cells to rub together. Some of the stuff he says is just asinine. But I used to follow him, so I mean, that's how much change has occurred with me over the years, right? So, so what I sort of landed in a place where nothing was certain, where everything was up for question and debate, and it was very hard for me to feel like I could hold a position on much of anything. And I noticed that these pundits would just lock into positions, and they would just stick with it and just go, and they'd build a base and kind of go with things from there. And I thought, well, I don't want to be that. I don't want to do that. I don't think that's actually very good critical thinking to do that. I think critical thinkers should change their mind when they get new and good information that causes them to question what's going on. But it also, but again, that you know, well, where do you draw lines on that? I hope I'm making sense here, not rambling too much. So basically, what I started looking at recently with the critical thinking was critical thinking is not a matter of not taking a position on something. I think for a while I thought that. And it's a matter of, you know, you could look at the same set of facts. Two different people could look at the same set of facts or information, and they could come to two different conclusions, doing the best they could to be good critical thinkers. And they'll come to different conclusions because they're different people. They have different ideas. They have different backgrounds, education, jobs, biases, all of the things that contribute to why we decide and think the way we do. And that doesn't mean that just because they came to two different conclusions, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're bad critical thinkers. It could mean that they are invalidating certain information that maybe they shouldn't, or they're not aware of certain information that maybe they should be, that's not in that pile of information that they're examining. Or, any number of things could be a reason why they might come to different conclusions. So thinking about that, I started thinking, well, okay, so maybe it's time for me to start actually coming to making up my mind about some of this stuff. And that's what I've been sorting out for myself more recently is, well, where do I stand on some of these things? Because I've been so easily, looking at both sides of things, or at least trying to. That's what goes on in my head. I don't know what comes out of my mouth all the time that reflects all of this, but in my head, that's what's been going on. And and being in the center is where you get it from both ends, So I started thinking, well, I have values and ideas and things, and maybe I should start standing up for them. So coming back to your question, Patricia, now that I've rambled on and on and on about all of my uncertainties and difficulties in sorting out my head, I think that the way that I have learned to overcome my self-doubt is to know that I have facts and evidence on my side on certain positions or issues that are important to me. I take the time to go do the research. If I don't do the research, the opinions and ideas that I have are conditional. They are not firm, set in stone, and I try my best to admit that and say straight up, well, I don't really know enough about that to have a strong position, but here's what I do think based on what I do know, and sort of try to operate that way. And I think that that's, the intellectually honest position to take, and that's how I have dealt with that. But I still, I don't know that I'm so different from everybody else that I, question myself, wonder about things all the time. Well, I guess there's some people out there who don't do that. And those would be the ones that I would, I might come down on them for some bad critical thinking if they're just sticking with, stuck, fixed positions and are unable to have a decent conversation or debate or discussion about those things. So as gone over in my video this week on Thursday, this last Thursday. Okay, guys. Hope that answers that, Patricia.